Welcome to A Dram of Outlander. This is Desiree, your podcaster and the writer for adramofOutlander.com. For all things Outlander, from the Dinah Gabaldon book series to the Stars TV series and everything in between. This is podcast episode 131, week 17 of the Drums of Autumn read-along. We are just about halfway through the book. Thank you for spending so many weeks with me, and there are so many more to come. I do have a quick announcement prior to starting the read-along portion of the podcast. Outlander Behind the Scenes and Outlander Medicine, and I will be going to Denver Comic-Con this year. It's June 15th through 17th, and we will be doing an Outlander fan panel. It's called an outlandish Outlander fan panel. We're not sure of the exact date and time yet. Those are being worked out, but I did get the congratulations email from the programming department of Denver Comic-Con, so I'm super excited to share it with you. It is going to be centered on audience participation and fans. I'll be moderating and participating along with Karen and Courtney. It's going to be a good time. We're going to talk about the books a little bit. We're going to talk about season 3, and we're going to do lots of talking about season 4 and making the most educated guesses, all of us, I'm certain. I also emailed Diana Gabaldon and asked her if she'd be coming to Denver Comic-Con this year, and unfortunately, she's going to be traveling in Europe. Boo for us, yay for her. So, there's that. Okay. And the summary goes something like this. Roger overstays his Oxford term. Brianna is not coming to visit as planned. A mysterious crate arrives. Roger confers with Joe Abernathy. Jesus H. Roosevelt Christ on toast. Did she do it? Yes. Oh, yes, she did. Roger makes a plan with Fiona. A grimoire is revealed. Midsummer's Eve is travel day. So these 4 chapters are centered around Roger Mackenzie Wakefield. We get to see Joe Abernathy and Fiona Graham, granddaughter of Mrs. Graham, who used to work for Roger's adopted father, Reverend Wakefield. So we're getting his side, and we're going to dig into what exactly is happening between Roger and Brianna. This is where communication can be very important, and lack of it can lead to not so subtle decisions. It can lead to assumptions. It can lead to curiosities, and definitely it can lead to worry. Inside the chapters. Part 8, Beaucoup. Chapter 30, Into Thin Air, Oxford, April 1971. The dean talks Roger into staying in Oxford an extra week to do a conference for some Americans, even though he's due to be back in Scotland. The money is a good incentive, so Roger agrees. Roger has a disconcerting letter from Brianna in his hand. So sorry, she'd said. Special invitation to engineering conference in Sri Lanka. God, did all Americans go to conferences in the summer? Valuable contacts, job interviews. Job interviews? Christ, he knew it. She was never coming back. Couldn't pass it up. Desperately sorry. See you in September. All right. Love. Yeah, right. Love. He balled up the sheet again and threw it at the dresser. It bounced off the edge of the silver picture frame and fell to the carpet. She was supposed to be visiting him in July. Now she's not coming. He thinks she's lying. A lying wee bitch, in fact. And has found someone else. He's trying to be mad. He feels empty. May 1971. Some boxes arrive for Roger on the last day of the conference. Remember, he's not supposed to be in Oxford right now. He's mystified. He opens the attached envelope. You told me once that your father said that everyone needs a history. The note inside read, This is mine. Will you keep it with yours? There was neither salutation nor closing, only the single letter B, written in bold, angular strokes. He takes the crate into a sitting room and looks for a tool to open it with. He wonders if she would send him her history. If she meant to break up with him. Good thinking, Raj. She packed it with museum quality. He finds a variety of things within. Photos and a large portrait of Claire, Brianna's Raggedy Ann doll, other memorabilia, a silver dinner service with the history typed on each. It's the family silver passed down from 1842. It was a wedding present to Frank and Claire. Roger places the items on the floor next to him, growing ever puzzled. She sent her entire history to him. He realizes she sent it there on purpose, knowing he was supposed to be in Scotland when it arrived. Last, he unpacks a jewelry box. It's filled with brooches and earrings. He notices 2 items are missing, the silver bracelet he'd given her and her grandmother's pearls. Jesus bloody Christ! He looked again just to be sure, dumping out the glittering junk and spreading it on his counterpane. No pearls. Certainly no string of Baroque Scottish pearls, spaced with antique gold roundels. She couldn't be wearing them, not to an engineering conference in Sri Lanka. The pearls were an heirloom to her, not an ornament. She seldom wore them. They were her link with... You didn't, he said aloud. God, tell me you didn't do it. He dropped the jewel box on the bed and thundered down the stairs to the telephone room. It took forever to get the international operator on the line, and a longer time yet of vague electronic poppings and buzzings before he heard the click of connection, followed by a faint ringing. 1 ring, 2, then a click, and his heart leapt. She was home. We're sorry, said a woman's pleasant, impersonal voice. That number has been disconnected or is no longer in service. Did she not think he would notice her phone number was inactive? Eventually, he would have tried to contact her. He wonders if she could have. Not going to Sri Lanka, of course, but could she have gone through the stones to her mother and to her father, Jamie? Yes, she could have, Roger. Very good thinking. So glad you stayed that extra week and had some dollar signs in your eyes. He's beside himself over Brianna possibly traveling through the stones without telling him. Where had she gone? He phones Joe Abernathy, Brianna's only other connection in the 20th century. Joe thinks she's with Roger, and Joe explains the last time he saw her. No, that's not right. She finished her coursework the end of April. I took her to dinner to celebrate, and she said she was going straight out to Scotland without waiting for commencement. Wait, let me think. Yeah, that's right. My son Lenny drove her to the airport. When? Yeah, Tuesday, the 27th. You mean to say she didn't get there? Dr. Abernathy's voice rose in agitation. I don't know whether she got here or not. She didn't tell me she was coming. Now we're getting to the bottom of the mystery. She left on April 27th for Scotland. Roger is panicked. Joe explains her plan was to go to Inverness from Edinburgh. She would arrive in Inverness for Beltane when the stones would be open. Now Joe is worried too. Roger asked Joe a simple question. Dr. Abernathy, it's just possible that Brianna's gone to her mother, to Claire. Tell me, do you know where she is? The silence this time was charged with wariness. No. No, afraid I don't. Not exactly. Not exactly a great way to put it. Roger rubbed a hand over his face, feeling the stubble rasp under his palm. Let me ask you this. Have you ever heard the name Jamie Fraser? The line was utterly silent in his hand. Then there came a deep sigh in his ear. Oh, Jesus Christ on a piece of toast. She did it. I love Joe Abernathy so much. He's so open and accepting, and he totally just took what Claire said and said, yeah, okay, go find your man. Wouldn't you? Those 2 words asked by Joe Abernathy haunt Roger. He and Joe had discussed the finer points of why Brianna would have gone. She found her father, and she was curious. Yes, Joe did know the way of the traveling. Claire had told him. It's not that. It's the popping up on the doorstep part. That, the way through. How she went. Look. Did Claire tell you? Yeah, she did. Yeah, she did say it wasn't quite like walking through a revolving door. To put it mildly, you know what it's like? The far voice sharpened with interest. Roger tells Joe he does know what the stones are like, but not everyone hears them. And he reflects on Claire going through at Craignadun on Samhain 2.5 years before. Remember, Claire accidentally went through at Beltane the first time and returned to the 20th century near Beltane on the eve of Culloden. It really does seem that when the stones might even be closed for other travelers, Claire can travel any time. Culloden was a couple of weeks from Beltane. So the fact that Claire could just travel outside of the normal time is interesting, and it makes me wonder if Master Raymond can travel at any time as well. I think he can. And where that puts her relationship to Master Raymond. Roger hates thinking about the sounds and the feelings at Craignadun. Joe is curious. So not everybody can go through, but you can? I don't know. I might. The thing is, he spoke slowly, trying to control his voice, and with it his fear. The thing is, even if she has gone through, there's no way of telling whether or where she came out again. I see. And you don't know about Claire either, then? Whether she made it? Well, Roger does know that Claire made it because of that notice, right? He knows she got there for at least a little bit of time. Roger doesn't want to go into the things he knows about Claire with Joe and explains, unless something did happen, it had to be big for it to make historical news. So the only way to go back in history and say find Brianna Fraser would be if she was murdered or she did a huge crime and was captured. Something big had to happen, such as a house fire on a settlement in North Carolina. Roger asked Joe if he knows how dangerous the 18th century is. He doesn't. But, no, though I gather you do. But Claire seemed to manage all right there. She survived. Not much of a sell for a vacation spot, is it, though? If your luck's in, you'll come back alive. Once, at least. Abernathy did laugh at that, though with a nervous undertone. He coughed then and cleared his throat. Yeah, well, the point is, Bree's gone someplace, and I think you're probably right about where. I mean, if it was me, I'd have gone, wouldn't you? Wouldn't you? Roger drives toward Inverness with "wouldn't you" continuing its chime in his head. He likely would. But I would have told you I was going to do it in the name of God, woman. Why did you not tell me? That's really Roger's point, is that she didn't tell him. So if she would have told him, would he have just stayed in the 20th century and been like, all right, babe, see you when you get back? I doubt it. I doubt it very much. He would have wanted to go after her. Lack of communication or purposeful miscommunication has Roger all riled up. Why not a note to say this is why I went, and this is why I need you to wait for me in the 20th? This is a mess in the making. What would you do? I would go like Brianna, but I wouldn't omit it to Roger. I wouldn't lie. For as smart as Brianna is, sometimes her common sense goes out the window. And did she not think Roger would figure it out? Uncle Joe is such a good guy. I'm glad he's a touchstone for Brianna and Roger in the 20th century. But now Uncle Joe is freaking out too, I bet. Chapter 31. Return to Inverness. Fiona has turned the old manse into a bed and breakfast. She's excited to see Roger, though her betrothed, Ernie, is less enthused. Roger becomes a detective to track Brianna's steps. He finds it fairly easy since there aren't many 6-foot-tall, red-haired women from America around Inverness. Roger ponders when he should go after Brianna through the stones. Well, he wasn't going to wait till November. God only knew what could happen to her in 5 months. Beltane and Samhain were fire feasts, though there was a sun feast between. Midsummer's Eve, the summer solstice, that would be next, June 20th, 4 weeks away. He ground his teeth at the thought of waiting. His impulse was to go now and damn the danger. But it wouldn't help Brianna if his impulse to rush chivalrously after her killed him. He was under no illusions about the nature of the stone circle, not after what he'd seen and heard so far. Very quietly, he began to make what preparations he could. And in the evenings, when the fog rolled in off the river, he sought distraction from his thoughts, playing draughts with Fiona, going to the pub with Ernie, and, as a last resort, having another bash at the dozens of boxes that still crammed the old garage. So he must choose one of the feast days to most safely pass. And Roger keeps himself busy while he quietly prepares for his departure. Some nights he even sleeps. So when it comes to the feast days, I did put a link in here for them. And Midsummer's Eve has always been interesting. And in Scotland, up until recent history, there would be the fires of Midsummer's Eve that you could see all over. Roger and Fiona have a chat. She wants to know why he has a photo of Gillian Edgars, a.k.a. Galis Duncan Abernathy, and why he's been up to Craignadoon. She's not having his joke of an answer. You know it's a queer place, all circles are, and don't be telling me you went up there to admire the view. Fiona knows something about Gillian and the stones, and Roger means to find out what it is. He tries to bargain with her, but she runs off saying she needs to think. His mind is racing, and he thinks of Brianna. His stomach flips and flops. He thinks of Fiona's words. She's dead, isn't she? She, being Galis, was alive when Claire went back the first time. Is she alive in the past now? The timey-wimey reality hurts Roger's head. Fiona is back at the sink. She's not supposed to tell, but she's going to tell him because she must. Roger remembers Claire telling about her and Frank seeing the dancers at the circle one Beltane morning, and Mrs. Graham was one of the dancers. A little side note on Beltane. It is pronounced a few different ways, but Beltane is the one that I found to be the most common, even though it's okay to say Beltane. Beltane is how we're supposed to say it. It just seems so foreign to me. Like Samhain sounds normal now, but Beltane does not roll off my tongue quite the same. No, I don't know. All I know is what Claire, Dr. Randall, told me. She and her husband saw women dancing in the stone circle one Beltane dawn, and your granny was one of them. Fiona shook her head. Not just one of them. No, Granny was the caller. Come and sit down and tell me, what's a caller? The one who calls down the sun. It's one of the old tongues, the sun song. Some of the words are a bit like the Gaelic, but not all of it. First we dance in the circle, then the caller stops and faces the split stone. And it's no singing, really, but it's quite no talking either. More like the minister at kirk. You have to begin at just the right moment, when the light first shows over the sea, so just as you finish, the sun comes through the stone. Fiona knows all the words. She's the caller now. Fiona met Gillian because she had been one of the dancers, and Roger asks her to go on. Roger asks if he knows where Brianna's gone. Roger is disquieted. The unreality of the situation swept over him all of a sudden. He couldn't be sitting here in the comfortable, shabby kitchen he'd known since boyhood, sipping tea from a mug with the Queen's face painted on the side, discussing sacred stones and time flight with Fiona. Not Fiona, for God's sake, whose interests were confined to Ernie and the domestic economy of her kitchen. Well, there's Roger being assumptive, isn't he? He tells her he must go after Brianna. Fiona is unsure if men can go through. She's only heard of women who do. Then she discloses a bomb. She has Gillian's grimoire. She meant to give it to the police after she disappeared, but after reading it, didn't think it would help them. Chapter 32, Grimoire. This is the grimoire of the witch Galis. It is a witch's name, and I take it for my own. What I was born does not matter, only what I will make of myself, only what I will become. And what is that? I cannot yet say, for only in the making will I find what I've made. Mine is the path of power. Absolute power corrupts, absolutely. Yes. And how? Why, in the assumption that power can be absolute, for it never can. For we are mortal, you and I. Watch the flesh shrink and wither on your bones. Feel the lines of your skull pushing through the skin. Your teeth behind soft lips, a grin of grim acknowledgement. And yet, within the bounds of flesh, many things are possible. Whether such things are possible beyond those bounds, that is the realm of others, not mine. And that is the difference between them and me. Those others who have gone before to explore the black realm, those who seek power in magic and the summoning of demons. I go in the body, not the soul. And by denying my soul, I give no power to any force but those I control. I do not seek favor from devil or God. I deny them. For if there is no soul, no death to contemplate, then neither God nor devil rules. Their battle is of no consequence to one who lives in the flesh alone. We rule for a moment, and yet for all time. A fragile web woven to snare both earth and space. Only one life is given to us, and yet its years may be spent in many times. How many times? If you wield power, you must choose both your time and your place, for only when the shadow of the stone falls at your feet is the door of destiny truly open. Roger thinks she's a nutcase and a poor writer. He thumbs through the sections and notices each of the sun or fire feasts. There are notes and crosses. He reads the notes under Samhain. This is the first of the feasts of the dead. Long before Christ and his resurrection, on the night of Samhain, the souls of heroes rose from their graves. They are rare, these heroes. He was born when the stars are right. Not all who are born to it have the courage to take hold of the power that is their right. She had also logged what she called case studies of dead people who were found at various stone circles in Scotland, Northern England, and Brittany. There were 22 persons listed. Some may have known what they were doing, while others were unsuspecting. It chilled Roger to his core. Claire was right. It was no revolving door. The disappearances near the circles were also notated. The crosses signified those who disappeared near each feast. One entry in particular caused Roger to stop. May 1st, 1945, Craignadoon, Inverness-shire, Scotland. Claire Randall, age 27, housewife. Seen last in early morning, having declared intention to visit the circle in search of unusual plant specimens. Did not return by dark. Car found parked at foot of hill. No traces in circle. No signs of foul play. Claire was part of Gillian and her information for her casebook. Gillian did not have any record of Claire's return 3 years later. The book felt like a bomb in his hands. The last section of the book is called Techniques and Preparations. Something lies here older than man, and the stones keep its power. The old spells speak of the lines of the earth and the power that flows through them. The purpose of the stones is to do with those lines, I am sure, but do the stones warp the lines of power, or are they only markers? He understands why the book upset Fiona when she read it. He walked toward the river, but couldn't get the last words from his mind. Shall I kiss you, child? Shall I kiss you, man? Feel the teeth behind my lips when I do. I could kill you as easily as I embrace you. The taste of my power is the taste of blood, iron in my mouth, iron in my hand. Sacrifice is required. That is some crazy and eye-opening information right there. We know blood isn't needed, but does it help steer? So, in that grimoire, Gillian makes a case for blood, but also gems. And Diana Gabaldon has her own theory of time travel and ley lines in the stones. And if you go to dianagabaldon.com, she has that whole theory laid out. It's also in the Outlandish Companion Volume 1, I believe. If I'm wrong, correct me, please. Otherwise, I have to pause and run downstairs and grab my book and look through it, which I don't want to do right now. Chapter 33, Midsummer's Eve, June 20th, 1971. We're getting a micro view of Roger from April to June. We haven't seen Brianna in 18 months, except for what is disclosed through Roger's point of view. It's Midsummer's Eve in Scotland. The sun hangs in the sky with the moon, summer solstice. The feast of Litha, Alban Eiler. Nearly midnight, and the light was dim and milky white, but light nonetheless. The description gets to me every time. I've been in Scotland during Beltane, or Brealtaine, as the days were beginning to stretch. I can imagine what the summer equinox would be like. The stones buzzed and hummed before Roger could see them. On prior visits, the stones felt odd, but they were silent. So he cannot travel at any time, only during one of the feast times. I think that Claire hears them no matter what. He and Fiona stopped 30 feet from the circle. He thinks Fiona is afraid for herself, but it's for him she's scared. Roger is dressed in 18th century clothing. He suddenly feels like he's playing dress-up. Fiona goes into the circle without him to perform her ceremonial ritual in privacy. The humming from the stones got into Roger's body, bones, and blood. It almost felt like he had an itch to scratch within. He hears her sing with words he cannot understand. Can he make it through? Claire and Brianna both had. Galus is his ancestor, so yes, he should be able. He likens the feeling from the stones to being eaten by ants. He's restless and cannot ease the feeling. Fiona's singing was making the sensations worse. Finally, she came to get him. And he cannot hear her for the noise in his head. Before he enters the circle, he stops and kisses her full on the mouth, requesting she not tell Ernie. That's the last thing he remembers. And then he smells something burning. He feels bodiless. He also smells coffee. The feeling of wrong came over him. His body hurts. What he thought was stars above him is Fiona yelling his name. "Oh, you're awakened, thank God!" "Aye, there, that's a good lad. Easy, aye?" It was the cloud talking, not the star. He blinked confused, and the cloud resolved itself into the curly silhouette of Fiona's head, dark against the sky. He jerked upright, more a convulsion than a conscious movement. They tried to figure out why he disappeared and came back. "I don't know. You went. You were gone. And then there was a burst of fire, and you were lying in the circle with your coat ablaze. I had to put you out with the thermos bottle." That's the coffee, all over him. Roger had to gather himself so he can tell Fiona what happened. Roger had thought of his own father, and he must have crossed his own timeline when he saw his father. He thanks Fiona for not letting him burn. They talk about the gemstones and his mother's locket, likely keeping him alive in the crossing. Roger realizes thinking of his dad was the problem. He decides to go again to Fiona's horror and objection. He explains how he knows it will be okay. "When I said I was thinking of my father, I was thinking of him from what I knew of him. The pictures of him in his airman's kit or with my mother. The thing is, I was born by that time. Do you see?" He searched her small round face and saw her blink slowly, comprehending. Her breath left her in a small sigh of fear and wonder mingled. "You didn't only meet your da then, did you?" she asked quietly. He shook his head wordless. No sight, no sound or smell or touch. There were no images at all to convey what it had been like to meet himself. "I have to go," he repeated softly. He squeezed her hand. "Fiona, I cannot say enough to thank you." Fiona understands. She stares at him for a moment, and then she places her engagement ring in his hand. It has a small diamond in the setting. She'll tell Ernie she lost it. It's insured after all. He's ready to go again. There was nothing more to say. He put the ring in his side pocket of his coat and glanced at the great cleft stone, its black sides starting to glimmer as bits of mica and threads of quartz picked up the dawning light. He could hear the hum still, though now it felt more like the pulsing of his blood, something inside him. No words, no need. He touched her face once lightly in farewell and walked toward the stone, staggering slightly. He stepped into the cleft. Fiona heard nothing, but the still clear air of Midsummer's day shimmered with an echoed name. She waited for a long time until the sun rested on top of the stone. "Slan late, a queer crier. Luck to you, dear friend." She went slowly down the hill and didn't look back. Well, well, well. So Fiona is a co-conspirator, as I would dare say Joe Abernathy is. So I wonder what Roger prepared for himself for this journey. I mean, we know he had the right clothing, but did he get proper money? Like, he made sure Claire had money on her. No problem. I imagine Brianna probably not only found clothing, but also prepared with money and some other provisions just to be sure she was okay. What did Roger do? So all we know is that Brianna went back, or presumably she did. She's not going to Sri Lanka. And she would have gone through about 6 weeks before Roger, maybe 7 weeks. That's a long time. Thankfully, travel is slow when it comes to 18th century Scotland, unless you had to get a horse or something, right? And it's slow enough now by car. Anyway, he's going to have to go back there, having no idea where she might be, and trace her steps. Where do you think Brianna would go when she got to Inverness? Where's the first place? I look forward to the next chapters. We'll be doing 34 and 35. And I think we will get to see Brianna again next. That's where we're going. I love the setup here, and we actually get to see how Roger thinks a little bit. Do you think he's being rash? Do you think he's being a bit overly masculine, wanting to protect her? Do you think it's his love for her? I think it's everything. And I think there is a streak of traditionalism in Roger that's very similar to Jamie, even though Roger is absolutely a 20th century man. I mean, he's a professor. He knows how to fish, but he doesn't know how to fight. He doesn't know sword play. He probably doesn't even ride horses. Like, he doesn't know how to use a gun very well, I don't think. He probably has used one once or twice before, but he doesn't do that. The father he grew up with was a reverend. So intellectual pursuit, historical pursuits, that's what they did. He's very smart and very intellectual. So those are traits that are really lauded in the 20th century, and they were also in the 18th, but in the 18th, you also had to be able to take care of yourself and fend for yourself. And as Roger said, the 18th century is a very dangerous place for everybody, but for women especially. And as a historian, he totally gets it. And every time we see Joe Abernathy, I always think of Galis Abernathy. And I wonder if we're going to find out what slave from her plantation that Joe Abernathy is related to. That would be so interesting to find out. And is he also the offspring of Margaret Campbell? That would be wild, wouldn't it? So this is a very timey-wimey thing. There's a lot going on. And like I said, I put a couple links in that talk about Midsummer's Eve celebrations and also the 8 fire and sun feasts on the annual calendar wheel that Druids or Wiccans or pagans might use. They're not totally interchangeable. Some have different names, but you'll be able to look at it and say, okay, these are all the feasts that the stones might be open. But do you think, like I do, that Claire is extra special and that she can travel at any time, regardless of whether the stones are at their most open or most powerful? She seems just to be able to. I don't know. I think it has to go back with where she is in the lineage of being one of Master Raymond's line. Because he's supposed to be as old as time, right? Like, he's been around. Z-Frog has been around. And he can travel forward and backward in time. So it'll be interesting to see who else is blue. It's fascinating. Now, what if Roger and Brianna have kids? Like, if that happens, are their kids going to be super travelers just like Claire? Were Claire's parents travelers? We don't know. We don't know anything. about that. And Diana Gabaldon is not likely to look into Claire's family history. She says she's not interested. So I doubt we'll ever find out. Okay, so there are some emails from listeners I'll get to before the other things. From our weekly emailer, Meredith from Everett, Washington. Dear Desiree, I have to say that I thought it was a very bad gesture for Brianna to send that box of things to Roger, but not write him a letter confessing what she was doing. I really hope that this is something they change in the show. It's bad enough that the TV show version of Brianna makes fun of Fiona because she tends to overfeed people and has her eye on Roger. But her leaving her own time for months without explaining things to Roger is just plain awful. Brianna just doesn't seem to have much empathy for other people. I really want the show to try and change that. If Brianna wrote Roger a letter explaining why she was going and assuring him that she'd come back to him, I'd like her much better. Yes, she could have with that crate of all her history, because if he wasn't supposed to be in Oxford at the time, by the time he got back to it could have been months. If he wasn't teaching for the summer, he could have stayed in Scotland for 4 or 5 months before he came back. And he never would have found her if he traveled after her at that point, but he would have had understanding. And maybe she would have come back. But we all know, once you get there, it's easy to travel from the 20th century. It's not easy to travel from the 18th century back and to get where you want to be. It's dangerous and difficult. And women often need chaperones. On another note, I'd like to address a comment you made about Lord John and his choice to love Jamie. I compared Lord John to Spock in a previous email. I'm sure you've seen the Star Trek episode Amok Time when Spock gives up his fiancée to his Vulcan rival. He gives him a piece of advice. He says that having is not nearly as pleasant a thing as wanting. Ooh, that's such a good line. Thank you, Meredith. It is not logical, but it's often true. We must never forget that Lord John Grey is a man of his time. He isn't part of the me generation. He was raised on the literature of the times, such as the stories of Lancelot and Guinevere, where all the consummation of the relationship could lead to is execution. Our generation doesn't live with the reality that if you're physically intimate with someone, they could be dead a few days later. That's very true. John knows the consequences of his lifestyle if he gets caught. Having a male lover could very well get him and his partner killed. But he does do that. If you read the Lord John books, he's just crafty about it. For the most part. By choosing to love a man who doesn't love him back, John ensures his own safety. We know that he does have a few partners over the years, but for him, these are brief encounters. Not long-term prospects. For him, love has nothing to do with attainment. Even if he fell for someone and they fell for him, they couldn't build a life together because it could mean their deaths. Lord John Grey accepts those limitations and takes what he can get. I agree with you, but I also think it keeps him from truly loving someone else. He was so hurt when Hector died at Culloden, his first love, that I don't think he feels like he can ever love somebody the same. And loving Jamie keeps everybody else at arm's length, even if they could set up a bachelor friendship. Because people didn't question bachelor friendships back then. Just like 2 women could house together and never be married, 2 men could house together and never be married. And not in the same room, of course. They had to have their own quarters. But people didn't openly suspect that they could have been gay. In the book, The Outlandish Companion, Diana Gabaldon talks about Lord John Grey as a character. Here's the quote. John Grey isn't a victim pining away from unrequited love. He finds love as well as physical gratification where he can. But he understands the need to love, to give of himself rather than demand the gift of another. Yeah, I don't think he's a victim either, but I do think he's pining away with unrequited love, even if Diana says he's not. And he uses that unrequited love to be his barometer. if he's alive. Interesting. Great email. Thank you so much, Meredith. I appreciate your thoughts week after week. You bring up things that I don't see. I'm sure others appreciate it too. And I also have an email from Kelly Mills. Between the books and TV show, there's an off-again, on-again fray among some fans regarding whether and how writers must address social issues through today's modern-day cultural lens. For example, consideration of the 1700s social mores regarding rape, corporal punishment, spouse or children, and a strong woman character emasculating the king of men. I'm still not convinced that Claire's TV character deprives Jamie of virility, vigor, or strength. We'll address that in a minute. What surprised me while listening to the podcast is the realization that Jamie punches 11-ish-year-old William in the stomach to get William to hit the road in order to avoid contracting measles. I gasped when I heard it. It is clearly a period piece, and I don't see the point in trying to hold the author-writer's character portrayals to today's evolved understanding of social issues. But punching the kid? I definitely reacted differently than when Jamie spanked Claire in Outlander or when Jamie and young Ian doled out corporal punishment to one another in Voyager. In the end, the punch to the stomach was quick and effective in getting William on the road. But I felt for this grieving, scared child. I don't think he probably punched him really hard. I think it would have been worse because of William's status if he would have slapped him in the face or shook him. Because of social structure. But Jamie punching him was, I think, just to shake him out of what he was doing. Because he was basically throwing a fit and not wanting to go and demanding he stay. Do I agree with it? No. Did I gloss over it? Yes. I didn't really give it a second thought in the last podcast until I got your email. I mean, he could have punched him in the shoulder, not hard, but sometimes you have to get somebody off a one-track mind, and that's what he was trying to do, I think. But yes, it's definitely a different thing. He could have just picked William up. But I think him punching him gives William the opportunity to gather himself and to be the Earl and to maintain his social status a little bit better. Because if Jamie would have picked him up, he'd have been treating him like a little kid. If he would have slapped him in the face, he would have treated him like a little kid. So, yeah, I have to really think about this through that time frame. It is difficult. And since you mentioned it, it's been on my mind a lot. What do the rest of you think of Jamie doing that? I don't think it was out of character for Jamie at all. I think it's frustration, but it was a way for him not to be too familiar with William, like shaking him, like putting his hands on him physically. Another thing that struck me in the podcast is how for the first time, John no longer holds any authority or power over Jamie. Good catch, Kelly. That's true. More freedom in the new world. Circumstances and time have dissolved the long-held subtle arrogance John held over Jamie and the Scottish culture. During Jamie's parole in the Lord John Grey books and in Voyager, and the Scottish prisoner, and while he was governor of Ardsmuir and Jamaica, their relationship has taken an important and necessary turn, allowing their relationship to last over a lifetime. I think John's character has softened over time and experiences, maybe Isabel's death, and he is definitely relaxed and less guarded with both Jamie and Claire while on the ridge. Yes, he definitely is more relaxed, and part of that has to do with the fact that they are on the ridge and they're totally away from society. And even though Jamie is in the new world, if people caught wind that who he was in Scotland and that he was a paroled Jacobite and he was a big deal in Culloden, he wouldn't be treated quite the same. And there's a lot of English in the colonies, as we know. But Lord John is able to treat Claire with abject honesty. And I think part of it is because he's jealous of her too. And that he's a little bit catty. So is Claire. but then it develops into something of their own foundational friendship. Then it develops into a relationship, and she totally knows that Jamie tells her everything and that she'll tell him everything anyway. So he may as well just say how it is to the both of them and have that same type of friendship. But in the reality of the social structures of the colonies, while the English are still present, when they're in the big cities or that are run by the English soldiers and they have society, then there still are some issues with them kind of being actual friends with each other. They can be friendly and they can sort of have business together, but the depth of relationship they really have would still, I think, be considered unusual and not well respected, perhaps. But now that Jamie's a big landowner, etc., 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 who knows? Excellent post. Thank you so much, Kelly. Great thoughts. And poor William. That kid has been brought up so spoiled. And I think it frustrates Jamie to no end. And finally, we're going to talk about how you can support the podcast. Well, you can support the podcast by going to social media and liking the Facebook page, A Dram of Outlander, joining the Facebook group, A Dram of Outlander. You have to answer 3 simple questions, because if you don't, you might be a bot or a troll. We don't need that there. Outlander fan spaces are great spaces to be, so answer the questions. On Twitter and Instagram, it's Dram of Outlander without the A in front. Of course, the website is adramofoutlander.com. And share the podcast. Tell people where to find it if you like it. I mean, you're listening right now, so you must like it. So share it with others. And please go to Apple Podcasts and leave a review. It helps people find me, and that's the biggest place where people find podcasts still. Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play. There's many other areas, but Apple Podcast is still the main place. So leaving me positive reviews really does drive people to the podcast. And please leave comments, thoughts, questions, interact with each other. I mean, the A Dram of Outlander page on Facebook is really driven by those who join it. You get to post things and interact with each other. There's very few rules. I don't like a lot of rules. You guys are adults, so am I. And you get to really talk to each other about things that matter. And it doesn't always have to be Outlander related. You can post things that are interest of you or things you might think other group members will like. And if you want to financially support the podcast, that's wonderful too. I need a new recording booth. I'm slowly building toward that, but that's what I need. You can go to patreon.com/adramofoutlander and provide as little as $1 a month. Every single dollar counts. Trust me. I do all this by myself. I do all the production, all the research, all the infrastructure is all me, Desiree. And I do it for you. My little podcast has grown quite a bit, and I have a lot of listeners, and I appreciate you. And I do this for you. And if you feel so led to make a contribution, thank you so much. And if you want to make a one-time contribution, you can contact me at contact@adramofoutlander.com or leave a voicemail message at 719-425-9444. And I will get back to you. That voicemail number is also for leaving comments, questions, thoughts. And you don't have to agree with me. You can totally disagree with me on things. That's the wonder of literature, because we all filter it through our own experiences, whether it's personal, educational, whether it's just life experience. And I use what Diana Gabaldon says as a foundation for these characters and what things mean and where they're going. But once the product is put out for us to read, the characters and the experiences and everything becomes each of our own individually. And we can all see things slightly differently. Oh, and that reminds me, after the Lord John and Claire podcast, I had several people think Lord John saying me too when Claire said she was born this way. They believed that Lord John meant that he was born gay. I don't know. I don't see that in there. I think he and Claire's personality are very similar, but I can understand why other people would see that. But then I have to say, is that filtering through our 21st century social mores? Or is it because of things that John has said in prior books? And the people who brought it up pointed to some things that he had said. So very good. Anyway, thank you so much for listening. Again, we're halfway through, and I hope to see many of you coming to the Denver Comic-Con and coming to an outlandish Outlander fan panel with me, Outlander Behind the Scenes, and Outlander Medicine this June. Thank you so much. And until next time, Slán je va.